While the war has gone on for far longer than anyone had anticipated, Putin's forces have been able to sustain its constant assaults on Ukraine during its special military operation. But how? Beyond Putin's willingness to send hundreds of thousands of his country people to their deaths, the answer lies in ammunition depots. Hundreds of them, all shipping munitions to the Russian soldiers on the front lines. This logistical operation has been the bane of Ukraine's brave defense, but it also means that Ukraine's forces have clear targets for their attacks inside Russian territory. Take out the ammunition depots and you weaken the invading forces. That's precisely what Ukraine did on the night of December 21st, 2024, as it dealt Russia a massive blow by taking out one of the key depots in the Rostov Oblast. But how did this attack happen, and why does it matter? We explore the answers to those questions in this video, starting with the most important part, the strike. On December 23rd, RBC Ukraine was among the first to report an attack focused on the Kadamovsky training ground in the Russian Rostov region. It noted that the Astra Telegram channel had released information claiming that Ukraine used a combination of missiles and drones to attack this key site. At least 4 drones managed to reach the facility, which is located in the village of Persianovsky, and caused a series of explosions. The attack caused a fire and explosions at an ammunition depot on the training ground, read the Astra Telegram post. There is no information on casualties, but casualties weren't the goal. Ukraine targeted the ammunition depot in Kadamovsky because it's part of a key supply line sending munitions to Russian soldiers on the front lines in Ukraine. It also helps that the base is home to Russia's 150th Motorized Rifle Division, which is equipped with T-90A tanks, and Russia's most modern infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. A strike against that unit's base amounts to a strike against the unit itself, minimizing its effectiveness inside Ukraine. The Kyiv Independent provided more details about the strike on December 25th. Speaking to a source from the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, the outlet discovered that the ammunition depot targeted by the drones wasn't merely damaged, it was completely destroyed. The SBU used long-range drones for the strike, with the source telling the Kyiv Independent that the depot was used by the enemy to supply its troops in the Kramatorsk sector. That sector is in the Donetsk Oblast, upon which Putin placed the majority of his focus during 2024. Now the Russians have significant logistical difficulties, claimed the source, which significantly affect their ability to conduct combat operations. Another source within the SBU described Ukraine's strike as hellish before stating that the attack was part of Ukraine's ongoing efforts to demilitarize Russia's rear areas. The concept is simple. Take out the weapons production and storage facilities behind the Ukraine war's front lines and you minimize the enemy's ability to fight. That source concluded their report with a chilling statement. Drone strikes against the Russian military will continue. Footage of the attack also emerged on December 25th. A 25-second video shows a massive explosion at the Kadamovsky site, sending plumes of smoke into the air. In the background, the viewer can hear the sound of many smaller explosions, almost like fireworks, which is likely the ammunition in the depot being ignited by the larger explosion. By the end of the short clip, all that seems to be left in the drone's wake is a flaming wreckage of what used to be a key Russian ammunition depot. Make no mistake about it, the Kadamovsky strike is a huge win for Ukraine, and that also means it's a massive blow for Russia. To understand why, we first need to learn a little more about the role Kadamovsky has played in the Ukraine war. That role was key even before Putin launched his special military operation. On February 10, 2022, just 12 days before Putin began his invasion, the Washington Post reported on Russia's military buildup in the borderlands near Ukraine. Rostov-on-Don, the home of the Kadamovsky base, was a key staging location for Putin's upcoming operation. In January 2022, Russia used the training ground to conduct a series of snap drills, allowing it to figure out how quickly it could deploy its motorized rifle divisions from the base after they'd traveled long distances to reach it. At the time, Russia was still claiming that it had no intention of launching a wide-scale military assault in Ukraine. Those claims were parroted by many Kremlin mouthpieces at the time, including Ilya Kiva. A pro-Russian Ukrainian politician, Kiva had appeared on Russia's version of 60 Minutes to state, "Russia has no motivation to attack Ukraine and conduct large-scale military operations against it, and every sane person understands that. But you have to have brains for that. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian authorities don't have one." Of course, we now know that Kiva's claims were nonsense. Russia was amassing troops and equipment in every major border region near Ukraine, and it would go on to launch its invasion less than 2 weeks after the Washington Post report. The training exercises conducted at Kadamovsky were key to that launch. Return to the present day, and we know that Putin's initial invasion of Ukraine failed. What was meant to be a 5-day operation that saw Russia storm Kyiv to take over the country has evolved into a 3-year war of attrition that has seen Russia lose substantial amounts of equipment and manpower. Kadamovsky's purpose also evolved during those 3 years. While still considered a training ground, it's been an important site in the massive logistical chain Russia built to sustain its troops on the front lines. And that brings us to a key question. Why was the strike at Kadamovsky so important? Breaking at least a portion of that supply chain is the first and most obvious answer. We mentioned earlier that Russia had been using Kadamovsky to supply its soldiers in the Kramatorsk sector of Ukraine. That area has been a constant target for Russia since the beginning of the war. For instance, June 2023 saw Russia launch missiles at the region's main city, also named Kramatorsk, that killed 8 people, 3 of whom were children. The missile hit a restaurant and shopping district, injuring 56 on top of the 8 it killed. Apartment buildings were also rattled by the missile, with some being reduced to rubble by the explosion. At the time of the BBC's report in June 2023, Ukrainian rescue services were still trying to free people from the rubble the missile created. Fast forward to September 2024, and Russia launched a guided bomb attack against the city. This time it killed at least 2 people and injured 19 more. So the city is clearly a Russian target, but why? The answer is that Kramatorsk is the largest city in the Donbas region that is still under Ukrainian control. It's home to around 150,000 and serves a dual purpose for Ukraine. It's both a logistical hub for its army — Ukraine uses the city as a rear base, allowing it to redeploy troops to the front line in the Donbas — as well as a temporary home for refugees. Speaking to the Moscow Times in October 2024, Ukrainian pastor Yevgeny Bakhmutsi explained that the city had been something of a haven for those displaced from other areas of the Donbas. "We mostly receive refugees from Chasiv Yar, Druzhkivka, and Konstantinivka," said the pastor. But pressure started mounting in the city as 2024 drew to a close. Russia's tactic of constantly deploying its devastating glide bombs was starting to take its toll. Even as the Moscow Times spoke to Bakhmutski, a pair of explosions occurred mere seconds apart. "Those are gliding bombs," Bakhmutski explained, with barely a reaction to the explosions. That brings us back to Kadamovsky. It's likely that the base Ukraine targeted with its most recent drone attacks either hosted or enabled the transport of the glide bombs that Russia has been using to devastate Kramatorsk. Don't underestimate the destructive power of these bombs. Made using Soviet-era explosive ordnance that can weigh between 1,100 and 6,600 pounds, these bombs are crude but effective. Russia installs a glide kit on each of the older bombs, allowing them to be launched safely from behind the front lines. The bombs then glide toward their target using their new wings, with their simplicity being the key advantage. Unlike cruise and ballistic missiles, they have no complex targeting systems that can be jammed, and Russia isn't concerned about striking specific targets. They just want the bombs to land and explode, taking out whatever is unfortunate enough to be in their blast radiuses. Glide bombs have been key to Russia's application of pressure on cities like Kramatorsk as it pushes to take more territory in the Donbas. Ukraine's strike on Kadamovsky is a massive pressure reliever. It remains to be seen if the strike will reduce the number of glide bomb assaults taking place in Kramatorsk. But what it's definitely done is broken a key part of the chain keeping Russian troops supplied on the front lines near the city. With less ammunition, those Russian forces won't be able to sustain the constant pressure they're exerting near the city, potentially allowing Ukraine to maintain its control over Kramatorsk for at least a few months more. That control means Ukraine retains a key staging location for its troops, allowing it to properly defend and perhaps even place pressure on the depleted Russian forces in the Donbas in the process. Breaking a part of Russia's supply chain to relieve pressure in the Donbas is a massive win for Ukraine. But there are other reasons why the Kadamovsky strike really hits Russia where it hurts. Take the 150th Motorized Rifle Division as an example. We mentioned earlier that this division is based near Kadamovsky and utilizes some of the best tanks and armored vehicles that Russia is capable of deploying in the war. The division has played a key role in some of Russia's victories throughout 2024. For instance, the summer of 2024 saw it take part in a concerted campaign to capture the easternmost portion of Chasiv Yar. By July 4th, the eastern portion of that city was under Russian control, with the 150th playing a part in forcing Ukrainian forces to withdraw from the region and refortify elsewhere. The unit has been so effective that Putin signed an executive order to grant the 150th the honorary designation of being part of the Idritsa Berlin Order. Russia's press release stated that the designation was granted for mass heroism and bravery, courage and fortitude, displayed by the division personnel during combat operations to defend the fatherland and state interests in armed conflicts. In other words, the 150th Motorized Rifle Division is both dangerous and effective. It's less so now that Ukraine has dealt so much damage to its home base. With the destruction of the Kadamovsky ammunition depot comes the likelihood that the 150th has lost access to shells and other ammunition that are vital to operating its T-90A tanks. The division won't become useless. Russia will likely try to divert ammunition from other areas in the Donbas to keep the 150th stocked up. but those diversions will weaken Russia's forces elsewhere. So Putin now has a catch-22 situation on his hands. Either the 150th, one of his best-performing divisions, has to be at least partially neutralized, or he must relieve pressure elsewhere on the front lines to allow that division to keep pushing beyond Chasiv Yar. Either way, it's another pressure-relieving win for Ukraine. We also can't underestimate the importance of Ukraine taking out a key Russian training facility. As we mentioned earlier, the Washington Post reported on troop buildups and snap exercises taking place in Kadamovsky less than 2 weeks before the start of Putin's special military operation. National Review provided more images and details about these training exercises. On January 27, 2022, images emerged of T-72B3 main battle tanks taking part in drills at the base. A month prior, another image showed a Russian soldier firing a rifle while standing next to one of the BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles that the 150th Motorized Rifle Division went on to wield during the war. These drills were key to Russia's preparation for its invasion, and it's likely that similar training exercises have taken place at Kadamovsky in the years since. Russia may have been using the base to prepare new troops as they arrived in the Donbas, with Kadamovsky serving as a staging area as well as a link in the Russian supply chain. The destruction of the ammunition depot at Kadamovsky takes on a new complexion when we consider its purpose as a training base. Yes, the ammo in that base can no longer make it to the front lines, but it also can't be used by the troops training at the base to grow accustomed to the weapons they need to use when fighting Ukraine. Plus, the simple fact that Ukraine was able to carry out such a successful strike means that many soldiers stationed in Kadamovsky now have to operate under the assumption that they're not safe. Ukraine took out a depot on December 21st. Maybe a future strike will destroy barracks, other facilities, or even the very soldiers training at Kadamovsky. So we see that the drone attack against the Kadamovsky base is as much a symbolic victory for Ukraine as it is a victory that mitigates Russian pressure in the Donbas. But there's one last aspect of the Kadamovsky strike that makes it such a massive blow for Russia. It was part of a larger attack conducted in the Rostov region toward the end of 2024. Newsweek reports that Kadamovsky was the highlight of a combined attack on Rostov that took place during the 2 weeks starting December 16, 2024. That combined attack saw Ukraine launch at least 13 missiles, along with 84 drones, with the strike on Kadamovsky also being severe enough that it almost damaged the nearby Novocherkassk State District power plant. Novocherkassk was far from the only part of Rostov's energy infrastructure that Ukraine targeted with these combined attacks. Just 2 days before the December 21st assault on Kadamovsky, the SBU launched a similar strike on Rostov's Novochakhtinsk oil refinery. Both the Russian authorities and various channels on Telegram reported on the attacks, noting that there was a fire at the facility, likely caused by long-range kamikaze drones. Novochakhtinsk was targeted because it's the only oil refinery operating in Rostov, according to Ukraine's general staff. The facility lies just 6 miles from the border with Ukraine and is around 120 miles from the front lines in the Donbas. Again, we see Ukraine attacking a key part of Russia's logistical setup here. The Novochakhtinsk oil refinery produces around 7.5 million tons of oil products per year, with a specialization in fuel production. It doesn't take a genius to conclude that a lot of the fuel the plant produces has been going to the tanks and armored vehicles Russia deploys in the Donbas. Taking away even a portion of this massive fuel source will achieve the same objective as decimating the ammunition stocks in Kadamovsky. It reduces the pressure on the Ukrainian troops bravely defending the Donbas. We have a few more details about how the Novochakhtinsk strike was carried out than we do for the Kadamovsky strike. The Kyiv Independent says that the SBU initially deployed kamikaze drones to the facility, which served more as decoys than true attacking threats. As those drones occupied Russia's air defenses, they created a window that allowed the SBU to launch Ukrainian-made missiles at the oil refinery. Those missiles hit their target, causing a huge fire and significant damage to the refinery. Russia claimed to have the fire under control by 6:45 a.m. the morning after the attack. However, simply causing a huge fire indicates that Ukraine successfully managed to burn up an extensive amount of the facility's oil reserves. That amounts to less fuel being sent to the front lines in the Donbas, which, when combined with the reduction in ammo coming from Kadamovsky, means that Russia's motorized divisions are going to be far less effective in the immediate future. And the Rostov strikes didn't stop there. On December 23rd, Ukraine turned its attention to the Milerovo air base in the Rostov Oblast. Again, drones were the weapon of choice, with Forbes reporting that Ukraine unleashed a powerful barrage of what were likely kamikaze drones onto the base. Russian aerial defenses opened fire, lighting up the night sky, but they were unsuccessful. Explosions decimated the base, with the likely targets being the handful of Russian Su-25 fighter jets that still use the base to stage attacks. It's possible these jets may have been launching glide bombs into the Donbas, though that's unconfirmed. Russia had already been pulling out of this airbase. In 2023, dozens of Su-25s and Su-30 fighter jets were stationed at Milerovo. Only a handful of the former remained when Ukraine conducted its December 23rd strike. But that doesn't matter. The Su-25s it managed to destroy still increased the cost of the Ukraine war for Russia, as well as created fear by demonstrating that staging any aircraft within range of Ukraine's drones and missiles could lead to them being targeted. Again, it's about relieving pressure in the Donbas. The Milerovo attack is a warning to Russia that Ukraine can and will hit any aircraft Russia attempts to stage within a couple of hundred miles of the front lines in the region. Of course, Russia tried to downplay this attack. Milerovo's local acting governor, Yuri Slyasar, claims that Russia destroyed 8 of the drones that Ukraine deployed, with another 4 being intercepted via electronic warfare. The governor was also quick to point out that nobody was injured in the attacks, though he couldn't prevent videos being posted to social media showing large explosions at his city's airbase. Injuring people wasn't the point. Taking out Russian aerial assets was, and it seems like Ukraine was successful. And there's more. Come December 26th, Ukraine targeted Rostov yet again. This time it attacked a plant in Kamensk-Shaktinsky that Russia uses to manufacture the solid propellant used in many of its ballistic missiles. These are the same types of missiles that Russia has used throughout Putin's special military operation to attack power plants, hospitals, and similar civilian infrastructure. This strike is part of a comprehensive campaign to weaken the capabilities of the Russian armed forces to carry out terrorist attacks against Ukrainian civilians, claimed Stratcom when reporting on this attack. And perhaps that's the biggest plus point of Ukraine's series of strikes in Rostov. Yes, the likes of the Kadamovsky attack relieve pressure on Ukrainian forces in the Donbas by disrupting Russia's logistical network, but they also make cities, such as the previously mentioned Kramatorsk, just a little safer. Taking out planes at airfields means that Russia has fewer fighter jets with which to launch its glide bombs. Destroying oil refineries leaves Putin's forces with less fuel, which, when combined with decimating ammo depots, makes previously effective units, like the 150th Motorized Rifle Division, far less impactful. And with later strikes minimizing Russia's ability to launch ballistic missiles, Ukraine also gives itself more time to rebuild and to continue to use the territory it still owns in the Donbas to prepare its own troops. Ukraine spent most of the latter weeks of December 2024 really hitting Russia where it hurts. But how much of an impact do you think that the Kadamovsky Strike, along with the others that took place in Rostov, will have on the Ukraine war? Will Russia find a way to recover? How will Ukraine take advantage of the time it's just bought for itself? Tell us what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out Russia's military is trapped. Will Putin admit defeat? Or click this other video instead.